Dad gave a toast at my brother's engagement dinner and didn't mention I existed. Not a slip, not an oversight. He held his glass up, looked around that private dining room at the Fairmont with 40 people watching, and said, "Kieran, you have always been our greatest achievement. From the day you were born, your mother and I knew you were going to do something extraordinary." He paused. "Let that land." Then he smiled and said, "And now you found someone worthy of you." I was sitting 6 feet away. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just picked up my water glass and took a slow sip and thought, okay, I see you. That was March, 3 months ago, and I'm still turning it over in my head. Not because it hurt in the way it used to hurt, but because of what happened after. Because of what my brother's fiancée did. Because of the look on my mother's face when she finally understood exactly who she'd been dismissing for the last 8 years. Let me back up. I'm the older one, 31 years old, grew up in Oakville, Ontario, the kind of suburb where everyone knows which family has the nicest car in the driveway and which kid got into Western versus U of T. My brother is 27. His name is Kieran. He's tall, he's charming, he was varsity lacrosse, he graduated from Queen's Commerce and walked directly into a financial analyst role at a Bay Street firm because my dad's university roommate made a call. And me? I took a different road. A longer one, a messier one my parents spent the better part of a decade making very clear they did not respect. I studied industrial design at OCAD. My mother cried, not with pride, with disappointment. She sat at the kitchen table the night I told her and said, "But what will you do with that?" My dad didn't say anything. He just left the room. I graduated in 2016, spent 2 years working for a small product design studio in the distillery district, then another year freelancing while I figured out what I actually wanted to build. In 2019, I registered a small accessibility consultancy. We helped businesses audit their physical and digital spaces for disability access compliance, then designed retrofits and implementation plans. It was niche. It was quiet. It was exactly the kind of work that doesn't make for good dinner party conversation in Oakville. My parents never asked about it. My dad, to this day, cannot tell you what I do for a living in more than 6 words. Something with design, I think, is usually how he describes it to people. Kieran got promoted to senior analyst in 2022. My parents threw him a dinner. Actual dinner party. My mum cooked for 2 days. That same month, I signed a contract with the City of Toronto to audit and redesign accessibility accessibility infrastructure across 11 community centres. It was the biggest contract I'd landed. I didn't tell my parents, not because I was keeping a secret. I tried before multiple times and watched my mum's eyes glaze over before I finished a sentence, so I stopped trying. That's the context. 8 years of that. 8 years of Christmases where my dad asked Kieran about his deals and asked me if I was still doing the design thing. 8 years of my mother forwarding me job postings from the federal government because she thought I needed stability. 8 years of showing up anyway because I don't. No, because I kept hoping something would shift because they were still my parents. Then Kieran got engaged to a woman named Margot. I want to be clear about something. I liked Margot immediately. We'd met twice before the engagement dinner, once at a family barbecue in the summer, once at Thanksgiving. And she was sharp and warm, and she asked me actual questions about my work instead of nodding politely and changing the subject. I remember thinking Kieran had no idea how lucky he was. The engagement dinner was at the Fairmont in downtown Toronto. My parents organised it. They invited my dad's brother and his wife, a few of my parents' friends, Margot's family, a couple of Kieran's work colleagues, 40 people, private room, prix-fixe menu. I found my place card on the table closest to the service entrance. I actually laughed when I saw it, not out loud. Just that quiet, internal laugh that comes when something is so on brand you can't even feel surprised. My cousin Oliver was next to me, and he gave me a look that said he'd noticed too. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. My mum came over to greet me when I arrived, a kiss on the cheek, a comment about my jacket, then she was gone to talk to Margot's mother before I could say more than hello. My dad shook my hand like I was a distant colleague. He was being polite too. Kieran hugged me and said, "I'm glad you're here, and I believe he meant it. He's not a bad person, my brother. He's just spent his whole life being told he's the important one, and that kind of thing settles into you without you even noticing." Dinner started. The wine was good. The food was good. I talked to Oliver for most of the first hour. He works in environmental law in Vancouver, and we don't see each other enough. Margot's sister was across from me, and she was funny and easy to talk to. I was, genuinely, having a reasonable time. Then my dad stood up to give his toast. "I've already told you what he said. What I haven't told you is what my mother did while he was saying it. She looked at me, just for a second. And in that second, I think she saw that I was watching her, and she looked away first. She knew. She knew what she was doing by organising this dinner and putting me at that table and letting my dad stand up and say those words. She knew, and she did it anyway. That was the moment something in me went quiet, in a way that had nothing to do with sadness. It was more like resolution, like a door closing softly. I raised my glass with everyone else. I smiled. I applauded. Then Margot stood up. This wasn't planned. I could tell by the way Kieran looked at her, slightly surprised. She had her own glass and she was smiling, but there was something deliberate about the way she moved. She thanked everyone for coming, said a few beautiful things about Kieran that I won't repeat because they were genuinely sweet and belonged to them. Then she said she wanted to say something about family. I thought she was about to do the standard future daughter-in-law speech. I started reaching for my water. When Kieran told me he had a sister, she said, I looked her up. Because that's what I do. I look people up. And I want to be honest. What I found stopped me in my tracks. The room was quiet. My dad was still standing, slightly awkward, not sure if he should sit. Margot turned and looked directly at me. I have spent the last 2 years working in accessible design policy for the province, she said. And anyone in that space knows the Aldrin method. She paused. I didn't know until 3 weeks ago that the person who developed it was sitting across from me at Thanksgiving. I didn't know she was Kieran's sister because no one told me. I felt the blood move in my face. The Aldrin method, I hate that name, it sounds more important than I intended, is a framework our team developed for sequencing accessibility retrofits in public buildings. We published it in 2021 through a provincial working group. It got picked up by municipalities across Ontario, then BC, then eventually referenced in federal accessibility planning documents. I don't talk about it because when you explain it out loud, it sounds like bureaucratic infrastructure, which it is, but it doesn't make for easy conversation. Margot was not done. Her firm has consulted on accessibility compliance for over 60 public buildings across Canada, she said. The work she started has directly influenced provincial policy in 3 provinces. I have cited her research and reports to the ministry. I've recommended her firm to colleagues. I had no idea she was family until I saw a last name on a contract renewal and did a double take. The room was very, very still. I watched my father's face. I watched him do the math, slowly, visibly, like a man who has misread a map and is only now realizing how far off course he's been. He sat down. I don't think he meant to. I think his legs just decided for him. My mother had both hands flat on the tablecloth. Kieran was looking at me, not with surprise exactly, more with something I can only describe as reckoning, like a version of reality he'd been half ignoring had just fully arrived. I'm sorry I didn't know sooner, Margot said to me, and she meant it. I could hear it. I'm sorry nobody told me. She sat down. The applause that followed was the most awkward sound I've ever heard in a restaurant. Half the room didn't know what to do with what had just happened. Oliver started clapping first, which I will love him for until I die. My mother leaned across my aunt and said quietly, "We are very proud of you." I looked at her. I held her gaze for a moment. Then I said, "I know." And I turned back to my cousin and refilled his glass. I don't want to make this into something neat, because it wasn't. The dinner ended eventually. Kieran found me near the coat check and held my arm and said, I didn't know any of that. About the policy stuff. About how big it had gotten. He looked genuinely unsettled. I told him the truth. I tried to tell Mum and Dad about the Toronto contract in 2022. I tried to tell them about the provincial working group. I gave up because it was easier than watching them not care. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, that's on me too. I should have asked. That meant something. I won't pretend it didn't. My dad found me in the lobby when I was waiting for my coat. He's a man who has spent his entire life being certain about things, and watching him be uncertain is its own uncomfortable experience. He said, "I didn't know the scope of what you were doing." I said, "No." He said, "I should have asked more." I said, "Yes." He looked at me like he was waiting for me to give him something, absolution maybe, or reassurance, or the particular kindness of pretending this was all just a communication gap. I didn't give it to him, not because I wanted to punish him, but because some acknowledgements need to sit in the air for a while without being immediately smoothed over. I got my coat, I hugged Kieran, I kissed Margot on the cheek and whispered thank you, and she said, "You deserved it. You deserved for someone to say it." I drove home on the 401 with the windows down even though it was cold, because I needed the air. Here's what I've been thinking about since then. My parents didn't withhold their pride because they didn't love me. I've worked through enough of this with my therapist. Yes, I have a therapist, and that's not a weakness. That's just what you do when you're carrying things you'd rather put down. To understand that their limitations aren't about me, even when they land on me. My dad came from a family where success had a very specific shape: stable income, recognizable title, linear trajectory. My mother wanted security for her kids the way someone wants it when they've lived without it. They weren't able to see the value in what I was doing because they didn't have the framework for it. Understanding that doesn't make it okay, it just makes it survivable. What I know now, that I wasn't fully sure of before that dinner, I don't need them to be proud of me. I built something real. I built it alone, with a team I assembled, and a vision I developed, and a lot of years of unglamorous, painstaking work. Whether or not my father could explain it at a dinner party was never actually the point. Margot saying it out loud in a room full of people didn't change what I'd built, but it did change something. It made it visible in a space where I'd been invisible, and there's a specific kind of relief that comes with that. Not triumph, not vindication, something quieter, like standing in a room where you've always felt like a guest, and finally having someone hand you a key. Kieran texted me the next morning. He said he wanted to have lunch, just the two of us, and that he'd had a long conversation with Margot the night before about things he was only starting to understand. He said he was sorry. 2 full sentences of it. Specific, clear, no deflection. I stared at my phone for a while before I answered. I said yes to lunch. I haven't talked to my parents since the dinner. Not because I've decided anything permanently. I'm not interested in dramatic declarations or cutting off speeches. I've just decided to take some time, to let that closed door stay closed for a while and see how it feels. So far, it feels like breathing. My team is finishing a second phase audit for a regional hospital network in New Brunswick right now. We're up for a federal contract that, if we get it, will be the largest thing we've ever taken on. I have a good apartment in Leslieville, a group of friends who actually know what I do. A Saturday morning routine involving a very good coffee shop on Queen Street East, where nobody asks me to justify my choices. My life doesn't look like what my parents wanted for me. It looks like what I built for myself. And the difference between those two things, I've learned, is the whole story.